So the intention here is to record the sequence of a game turn in the game The Korean War. Not necessarily to play a whole game turn in real time, but to go through each sequence just to give an indication of how the game plays out. So we're on the third game turn, which is where it really starts getting interesting in the main campaign game, because the first 2 months of the war have gone past, or now beginning the third month, and the US can really start stepping up its activities in terms of reinforcements and so forth. The first part of each game turn is the political phase, and it begins with the UN commitment segment. So the UN is able to adjust his commitment levels. Now, I have three. There's rules of engagement, and that really determines where I can do air interdiction. Now, at the moment, I have it at 2, which means that the US can interdict all South Korea and all of North Korea except the 4 all the way up. Can't really see it from here, but the 4 northernmost regions. So this is good because deployment reinforcements will come in down here, and I can interdict them even before they start moving into South Korea. If I move it up, I can move it up 1 level. At this point I started it at 2 in the last turn. It doesn't come into effect in turn 1. If I went up to turn 3, I could do it in all provinces except for 1. If I do it if it goes up to 4, 5, 6 or 7, then I can perform air interdiction wherever I like. And at 5, 6 and 7 I get bonuses on the interdiction die rolls. And if I go up to 5 or more, I can use atomic weapons. But that is going to increase global tension. Atomic weapons will give me a massive bonus on interdiction. And interdiction movement of along the road and rail network, even on normal terrain, is very important. So interdiction of the road and the rail network is going to be very helpful. But I'm happy at 2, so I'm not going to move that this turn. Then the next thing is mobilization. Now my mobilization level is 1, the minimum at the moment. Now essentially I would increase that if I want to be able to automatically add replacements to depleted UN divisions. I have no need of that right now. I might need it at the end of this turn, in which case I think I'll go up. So rather than, as I increase all of these, it will have a cost, it has potential cost, so I'm not going to increase that. However, the third thing which I can decide for my commitment is intervention. Now I started on an initial intervention of level 2, which gave me the maximum reinforcement, so the maximum input of units from Far East Command into the game and Air Force in preparation for the beginning of this turn. However, I think I need to increase it again to get the full benefit of this turn. And yes, that's true. Essentially, if you don't increase commitment intervention level each turn, you're not going to receive new reinforcements all the way up to about turn, I think you need to make that decision up to turn 8. So I'm going to escalate by 1 point. I mark. Yes, there's a track, and my initial intervention I determined at level 2. I've escalated 1 level. I'm not quite sure why you have an exclamation marker. You can't go down. I don't know why you don't just move that up. So there must be some reason for recording the initial intervention. I'm not quite sure what it is, but what this means is that I now check and I will be adding reinforcements, which I wouldn't have got if I had not escalated that intervention level this turn. So we see I'm escalating to intervention level 3, we're now entering turn 3, so I'm going to get D, E and F reinforcement clusters. If I'd stayed at 2, I would have only got D, which would have been Air Force, which would be good. I think I need the ground forces too. So I scoop them up here. They're all handily marked on the counters. So D's actually already there. I was confirmed that last turn. So E and F. So E goes in action phase 1 and F goes in action phase 2. Now, if this was game turn 5 or higher, the North Koreans could declare Formosan invasion, which I think raises the global tension, maybe 1 or 2 other effects. We're not there yet, so that doesn't happen. But now I do check the global tension track, so I have to add up the points we have here. Destabilization value of 12, 1 and 6. So what's that? That's 19. So I'm rolling on the 19 to 22 column. Roll a d10 and we have a 0. So that is lovely. That was a roll I actually got that last time. So there's 0 escalation. There's no, if the Formosan invasion had occurred, there would be +1 to that die roll. So, but that means that then some forces are tied up, some North Korean forces are tied up and do not get on the map. Could be worth it. So now we go to B, the UN air mission phase. We started out with some F4Us and some F80s. Now we've got 3 fleets of B-29, two fleets of B-29s and a fleet of B-26 bombers, another F4U, another F and 2 F-80s. So we now decide whether we're going to use those for interdiction or close air support in combat. And what I really want, I think, is to start interdicting, and for that to be effective I need at least 4 of these air fleets or whatever it is the counters represent in interdiction. Okay, so 2 CAW and the 22nd and the 19th B-29s will be on interdiction in Cheongkong, which is a province which is, so North Korean road movement is restricted, and I'm using one of these homemade things to do a big marker on the map to remind me. So North Korean road movement is restricted in this province, the white line here delineating, so where's it there? So it's not all of it. I mean, I could have chosen that, but I'm hoping they won't get that far. Then I still have some, just a quick flash at all the counters. You see there's a lot of counters in the game, but most of really you need to look at sort of at this column, because these are breakdown counters. Then okay, there's some regimental counters as well, but these are all divisional and these are the breakdown counters for them. Then there's extras, there's assets, regiments. But yes, there are a lot of counters. A lot of units can come on. These ones, for example, the Communist Chinese, that might not happen, but I guess the likelihood is that it will. Anyway, where was I? So now, and the rest of these are on close air support. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my air support level is 8. So effectively for 8 combats, I can either add or subtract a 1 on the D10 on offence or defence. Now we check the interdiction. So my interdiction level, those B-29s give me 4 and the other ones give me 1 each. So I'm on 10. I look at the track here, 8 to 17 column. I roll the D10. It's not winter. The engagement level I have not raised up high enough, so I don't add to this roll. I get an 8. That's fantastic. I get the number of 3. and I'm going to mark it here because I subtract that number from the North Korean depot roles. So that's great, they're not going to have so many supplies to play with. Okay, so now we move on to segment C, the UN Far East Command enhancement phase. Now, some of the UN units have yellow symbology. In fact, that's all these ones on at the moment because obviously the Far Eastern Command was close. I can, provided I think they have a route of supply, I can enhance these to a better, well supplied and equipped unit. I think I can only do one this turn, I will just check that. Yes, okay, so for this game turn, the next, I can choose any one and enhance it. So I just remove the counter and swap it out. So effectively what I'm doing is swapping a 12 strength combat value unit with a 20. So I do that. In fact, I've got 3 to choose from here. I think this one will hold the line with that one. Okay. And on turn, that's from 3 and 4 I do that once. Turn 5 I can do that with 2. And then that's it. That's the only enhancement I can do in the whole game. So that segment won't be needed again after that. So now we go to D, UN Amphibious Capacity Phase. Now that is determined, I made a mistake about that earlier as well because in the sort of basic game it determines on game turn, but now it determines on my mobilization level, and because my mobilization level is 1, I can only have 1 amphibious invasion or evacuation per turn. So I've tracked that. Now we go to E, the first action phase. That starts with reinforcements. So first we will roll for the North Korean reinforcements. Basically, 2 or higher they're going to get reinforcement, but there are modifications. They rolled a 6. Now I adjust that because for nothing, okay, so the UN can adjust it down depending on if they have Seoul, Pyongyang or Wonsan deployment areas. So on a 6, the North Koreans get the division with an asset. So generally they get a division, sometimes an asset, sometimes occasionally nothing. As the UN moves up, they will be getting nothing in terms of that, which is when I guess they will be wanting to call in the Chinese. So I place that on a deployment centre. I'm going to put that. So the choice now is, sorry, I'm looking at out of focus. The choice now is, do you put it in Pyongyang for the western field of operations, or Wonsan for the eastern theatre. And I think I've got 2 divisions in the east, so I got that well covered. I'm going to need more in the west because I'm using whole divisions to cover possible invasion zones. I really need to get those garrisoned. In fact, I think I can bring a garrison there. I'll have to check that rule. Yep, so I'd forgotten that. Anytime the North Korean takes a port text, they plop a garrison in it. So they're not incredibly strong, but they are enough of a deterrent to make the UN think twice. Anyway, so where were we? Reinforcement, yes. So place the North Korean reinforcements here. Now we have to wait to turn 4 for the South Koreans to start getting reinforcements. But I do at this point. Can you see my track here? Yeah. So we're in the first action phase. So I move the reinforcements from there, and I place them down here where you can't see, in the Far East Command General Headquarters reserve box for the UN. Now I've got 2 armour assets and a Marine regiment coming in. Not terribly strong units, but those Marines for a regiment, they're extremely strong. But they will come in very handy. And then we go to deployment segment, which is then I choose whether to deploy them, or I could perhaps tag those for reinforcement in a non-Pusan fort. So if I bring them in Pusan, I deploy them immediately now. Or I could I could use an amphibious invasion to bring them in a port around here, or I can use the amphibious, or I can bring them in a delayed action. It will take an action cycle sort of in transit, so it wouldn't be a sort of invasion which is given a sort of major advancement and green light. It would take a while, I guess, to sort of check out that it's safe and so forth. Well, I think you know what I'm trying to intimate. It will take longer if I don't do it as an amphibious invasion. So the choices are: I can hold that marine and an asset for an amphibious invasion this turn, maybe along here, maybe even up here against the garrisons, but he's more likely to fail because he's not a holder vision. Or I can hold him off, put him down in this box, and then in the next actions phase of the turn, he'll be able to be just put down in a friendly port. Or I put him in Pusan immediately if there are friendly. There's Pusan. There's no friendly ports up this side, but I could do an amphibious invasion, and it might be worth holding him ready to just insert there. Although if I put him in Pusan, he can immediately move up. I think I have to put him in Pusan because otherwise, if the North Koreans get initiative this turn, and so they have the first action, they're going to immediately move straight down the road there, and I think they can reach Pusan. I counted that out before. Road movements. It's interesting actually, for the North Koreans, they move half. It's half a movement point. You can have 12 movement points if you spend all 3 of your action points. So they can move 24 hexes on the road. The UN can move, it's a third, so what's that? 36. They can move 36 hexes on the road. Okay, so I had 2 armour assets there, but you can only assign 1 to a regiment, so that Marine regiment is getting 1 armour asset. That one will have to wait there for another unit. Now we get to the all-important depot deployment phase, so or segment as they call it. So we're in the first action phase. At the beginning of that we had the reinforcement segment, and now we come to the then the deployment segment, and now the depot placement segment. Now essentially what you can do is you can place it on or adjacent to a city, or on any road or railroad hex. At least it is on or within 3 hexes of a friendly combat unit, and then not in like enemy zones of control and that kind of thing. Now for the Americans I'm going to place it, or the UN I'm going to place it in Taegu, down here, and I'm going to give them just 1 depot at strength 3 because anticipating we're going back there, so we might be storing supplies there. I could split it there, but that's close enough. The movement is fine enough that these guys are all going to be defending at full value, and if I had it further forwards, obviously it might get overrun by the North Koreans. North Koreans, again, for similar reasons, I could split and have 1 on the eastern seaboard there, but that's more diversion than their main thrust, and they need to keep their main thrust going. And now this takes a bit more thought, because the temptation is to put it down here, maybe have it covered by a unit, but with this American unit threatening here, there's a division there. The thing is that once depots are placed, you can't move them, so although you might not stockpile supplies, They're also helpful to assign assets to, in which you can then reassign out to other units. So maybe it is better. That's too far forward. I don't have anyone here, so I could potentially put it back here. That would be easier to defend. But then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, so we could get a scoot from 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, yeah, no, so it's going to be safe here in Seoul. How do you pronounce that? Seoul? I think it's pronounced Seoul, isn't it? So they're going to put depot level 3 there, and the Americans depot level 3 there. So then we go to the depot status segment. That's if we check if it's in supply or isolated. Now neither of them are isolated because we didn't place them isolated and there's been no movement, so that's fine. And then we go to the depot supply level segment. So we've got the UN depot supply table here. Now normally you'll find where it is being supplied by which city is its kind of supply source, and then you'd check the level of the depot 1, 2 or 3, then you'd roll the die and this will tell you how many supply points you get. On a 0 you get 1, on a 5 you get 2, and on all up the way there. So that's if it was Busan, on a 0 or 1 you would get 1, on a 2 or higher you would get 2. Now because we're on game turn 3 and 4, so the beginning game turns are a bit particular, things are still settling down, we use different tracks. Yes, so we're using this game turn 3 one. The port is irrelevant, they're supplying it. So we're level 3, we're going to be rolling on this column, and our modifiers are down here. -2 each border hex side crossed in tracing supply line to supply source. So that's 1, 2. I don't think I do those die rolls modifiers. So so you can see those modifiers would apply on other game turns, but not 3 or 4. So, for example, what that would mean is that if your supply port is Busan down here or Masan here, and you're going through 1, 2, or even 3 borderlines, you're going to get minuses on your rolls. So you can't just keep them far back and safe. You do have to move them forward, or else you're not going to get very many supplies up quickly. The UN is rolling up here, and for the sake of this game we get 5. So sorry about the jiggly camera, which is a 1. That was pretty much a done thing because it was only on a 9 we would have got 2. So you take, where's my hand? You take one of these supply point markers and you place it under your depot, and that's secret, so your opponent doesn't know. Now I have to do the same for the North Koreans. They have a similar chart, but they have the interdiction level. You remember that was 3 from the chart according to the air interdiction. So their depot is going to be, it depends on the province it is. So it's in Gyeonggi province and it's 3 level, so we could get up to 2 supply points, but I have a minus zero order 4 which goes down to 1. That's going to be 1, isn't it? Yes. Okay, and now we come to the supply point expenditure segment. So you can choose to stockpile, but what effectively you're doing here is you're choosing whether you're going to have, let me see if I need to get the terms correct, your commitment level in the sense of limited, accelerated or offensive. And if you remember, that determines if you spend no supply, you're automatically restricted, so everyone's going to have half attack and defense. But otherwise you can get modifiers to your attack and defense depending on how close to that supply depot your units are. Now both of them have 1, so the best they could get is limited commitment level, and that's also going to determine who has the initiative, and whoever spends more will get the initiative. Now I think that the UN are not going to spend their supply. They're going to stay on the defensive because they're oh no, if they're that would mean they're restricted. Yeah, they need the limited because they need at least times. They don't want to halve their defensive bonus, so they're going to spend that 1 supply point which they just gained. So we remove that and we raise their initiative level to 1. And I don't think there's anything to record what. Oh yes, there is, of course, yes. And then you take a marker, and so if the UN says restricted commitment, it could have been restricted, limited commitment, which we're choosing. Place that on the depot, so now we know where we are with that. And then similarly, the North Koreans need the same. They're going to spend their precious supply to get limited commitment marker on their depot. So then we move to the next segment, which is initiative segment now, because we both got initiative level of 1. I have to check who in the event of the tie, yes, the North Korean has it, them being the major aggressor, I guess. So they will get the initiative, they get the first operation. And now we go to the asset reassignment. So what that would mean is that if, for example, at the top of this, so what I could do is I can take an asset from a unit that is has a line of communication, and I can place it on the depot. Then at the beginning of the next action phase, that depot can reassign that again to another unit that is within a suitable range. So what I'm going to do, otherwise assets, like armour assets, and there are also non-armour assets coming later on the UN side, otherwise they can't move. They have to stay with the division or regiment they have been assigned to. So this is that upper level decision making before we go to active operations. So I'm taking 1 out there from the Koreans, putting that in the depot. For the Americans, the UN, no, I think they're going to have to keep, they've only got 1 armour asset in play at the moment, so they'll keep that where it is. So then we go to the operations segment. Yeah. So remember, this is the first action phase. We've done reinforcements, we've done deployment of those reinforcements, we've sorted out the depots and supply, level of commitment and initiative, we've transferred assets, and now we actually go to the operations cycles. So the North Koreans go first, and what they will do is they will roll on, compare it to their initiative level, which is based on the amount of supplies they spent, which is 1. So they could get from between 0 and 3 operations. They roll a 5, which is going to give them 2 operations. That effectively means they can move 2 units, and then we go to the UN. If they had more, like they could spend up to 8 or 9 supply points if they've been stockpiling them in, for example, different depots. they could spend them all at once and possibly have up to 4 operations happening at once. Not very likely unless there's like a big lull, on both sides, and each side starts stockpiling. So we see here the North Korean initiative track. In fact, I was missing a marker for that. The only marker that I found missing in the game, but there was a spare in their colour, so that's fine. We got 2 operations, and in each operation you can get 3 actions. And I spent both those operations, so I should mark this down. I essentially spent them to move up these 2 units on the eastern seaboard. So they got into some cover terrain there, but effectively threatening here and here. Now they are kind of quite weak now, because once units are off their mobile side, they have effectively like half strength. I guess that while they're reorganizing and having manoeuvred. So now we go to the UN. Likewise, their initiative level is 1. So I can quite easily show you their initiative table. So we're not on game 1 or game turn 2 anymore. So their initiative level is 1. They could get between 0 and 3. Nine, perfect. So they get 3 operations. So we will mark that here. You can see it could go all the way up to 4 if you've got a lot of initiative. I spent supplies in one game, one actions phase. So we got we're able to do move 4 units essentially. So there's no need really for that to move at the moment, because they're done for the turn and there's nothing else there. We've got gaps in the line here, but if he moves it on, then he scoots around here. That line we really want as is. Drat, and we're in that awkward position where we've got lots we can do but nothing we want to do. So the consideration might be some attacks. The thing with this is it's interesting. If, say, this unit activates to attack, then he has to attack. Now you can choose one defender. No, all the defenders that are adjacent to the activated unit would have to attack with him. However, a non-activated unit could add its strength in. So if he activates, essentially those 2, because they're adjacent to the activated, will be defending, but he can join in, whether he's moved or not, whether he's had his go or not. But obviously he's not very strong. Really would like those 2 together, as the North Koreans had done. So him against those 2 is not very nice. Although we would be able to get some combat air support, and we could do an all-out attack. But then they will be spent, you see, and at half strength. Not so much half defense strength. Defense is the one on that side, so 7s compared to 11, but still not as strong as they would have been. Now, the decision for the North Korean operation was quite simple, at those movements. But you do actually have 8 choices. You can activate, which is activate for movement and or attack, or you can amalgamate. So if like smaller units are together, maybe ones that lost steps, you can add them together to gain full strength unit. Or the UN can reorganise. Now what that means is you could break a division down into 3 regiments, or build up 3 regiments in the same hex into a division. You could do an amphibious assault, amphibious evacuation, parachute drop. We don't have parachute units yet, and Chinese and or Soviet thing will come in later. Or you can pass, and you have to do one of those. So if I don't spend these 3 activations, operations, sorry, I'm going to have to pass. And if I pass, and then the Chinese pass, then that is the end. Though I don't think they'll want to pass, because they're going to want to carry on. And if we pass this, that's it. We can't do any more operations in this sequence. So that's a no-go. So effectively what we're going to have to do is, I think anyway what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this unit down. So for one operation, I'll mark that on the track, I'll break that one down into 3 regiments. Now, although each counter is given a historical designation up in the top left there, like 7CV, 24th Regiment, so forth, it doesn't have any effect on gameplay, so you don't have to worry about which regiments you're replacing this one with. I could if I wanted to, but I don't have to. So that one comes off. Available for later. So now those have not activated, so they're not on the spent side. So that's one operation. Now I can expend another one, and one of those can activate. And I'm going to move him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 up to there. Moved him round to there. And then I got one more operation. And I'm going to use that to move another one of these further back down the road. Okay, so that is the UN operations for that activation. Now there is one thing which astute viewers, and anyways, you might have read it anyways, that there's nothing in the rules to say that the UN could not reorganize that, like break it down, build it up, break it down, build it up, break it down, build it up, and thus obviate them ever having to take the pass action. It's simple to house rule that. It's obviously not the design intent, is that I'm going to say you can't break down and build up the same units in the same operations, in the same actions phase. So you get 2 per turn, so you could break them down in one, build them up in the next, or vice versa, but not in the same one. So those ones are done, and now we go to the North Korean. So I will play out this, and then we'll come back towards the end of this action phase. In fact, I think I'm just going to take you through this just to show you. So the North Koreans got one operation, and they're going to use it to activate this fellow here. So he moves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for crossing a river, 7, 8. So that costs 2 out of his possible actions, out of his 3 possible. So he's still not spent. He can spend the last action to attack, just a regular attack on this fellow. Now what he has to do, there's no armour assets involved, so we don't have to worry about that, but he has to check how far he is from his depot in terms of movement points. Can't be through the enemy zone of control, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for crossing the river, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for crossing it back, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now that's more than 10, so he's actually within secondary command range of his depot, and it's a limited offensive depot, so he's on limited offensive, limited commitment, so he's on half attack value, which brings him down to 6. The UN fellow has defense of 1 because he's spent. So the North Koreans are going on a 6-1 in non-clear terrain, and the Americans are going to spend 1 of their air support, so I get a -1 on this die roll. Okay. Oh dear, and they rolled a 0. It goes down to -1. That is terrible. That is A2, so that means the attacker loses 2 steps, so that division goes all the way down to 1. You get 3 steps essentially. Now he's got 1 and he's spent. So that unit is very fragile. Okay, so that's the end of the North Koreans. So we go back to the UN. Oh, and they roll a 0 for on their initiative table, and they've got 1 0, so they get 0 operations. So then we go back to the North Koreans, and they rolled a 9, which gives them 3. So oh, did I miss out some North Korean operations? Never mind. So the North Koreans have got 3 now. What I actually wanted to show you was the UN. So I'll come back to them in a minute. Yeah, so the thing is that, you see, when you activate, you could move, attack, move and attack, or you could entrench. And if these units start entrenching, they're going to get very strong. So really the North Koreans are going to try and break away. I was considering them attacking, but they didn't do well last turn. They're over a river here. They're going to be better to try and punch through here. They've got 3 activations, so they have a chance. The way to do it is to move 1, get a big attack, pushes the hole, then the next 1 or 2 activations go through the gap. So you just have to decide, do I want to send in my armour, or will I send in without armour? The armour, the chances are I'm going to get a nice attack. So that's going to be 1 movement point there, plus 3 for moving out of zone of control is 4. So that only counts as 1 action, fortunately. So we have 2 left. Now, because we've got an armour, because we've got 2 left, we can go for an intensive attack. Not all out, because I'm not using all 3. That will give us a bonus. But anyway, first we go to the armour. So we've got an armour asset here with 8 attack points. Then he's got anti-tank defence of 1. So that's 4 to 1 or above. I roll on the table here. And I'll just give you a quick look. So this is the armour table. We're on the 4 to 1 column. On here we would get attacker would lose steps, so some armour assets would flip. But I rolled a 3. Now the unit is in clear terrain, so it's not in a city hex or anything like that. We can't use close air support for this, so it's just like quick armour versus armour, anti-tank, scrap. So we get a +2. So then we go to the combat results table, and we're looking at that North Korean division on attack strength 12 versus defense strength of 2, with a +2, and there's a gap in the rivers there. So there's no river. So we're looking at 12 to 2. So in clear terrain, we're on the 6 to 1 column. And we get +2 because of the armour assault, but the UN's going to spend 1 for close air support. He had 8 assigned, so he spent 2. So that's -1 +2, so we're on +1. And +2 for the intensive attack, so we're on +3. We roll a 7, +3, that's 10. That's going to be a nice result. So where were we? 6 to 1. Defender retreat, and they take 3 step losses. So that's a regiment. It's only 1 step. He's gone. And because it's UN, we put destroyed units here. And they can be reconstituted or brought back. So the attacker moves in, and he spent 2 of his actions for the intensive attack, and he's now spent. I don't think spent is the term that is used. You have a mobile side and unmobile side, so he's unmobile now. He's finished. Okay, so it goes on like that until either you've spent all your units or you both pass in succession. But I think it's worthwhile to continue where we were. So there was North Koreans had 3 operations, so that was 1. Now this fellow's got another operation, and he has 3 actions available. And then I think Probably need to keep him as a backstop, in fact. We'll keep him there. Okay, so to keep these ones engaged is essentially what I'm thinking. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then he could spend, that would take 2 action points. He could spend the last one to attack here and perhaps get into that hex and then be cutting their supply route. So that is a nice move. So 2 action points to take him there and then an attack. No armor, so it's just a straight 12 to 1 versus 1. It's, you can't have any modifiers except the UN. Again, to spend 1 on close air support, so -1 on the die roll gets 8. So 7 versus, where are we? 12 to 1. That's splattered. Okay, so he gets in there. And now we have one more operation. Do I move one of these? And then he could come through here. I think we bring this fellow down. So the North Koreans have got the 2 units here. They could either concentrate on this axis or this one. I think this is the correct one. They haven't got enough to get over this river, but they could get to here, which would back up this one. So I'm going to do, oh no, that's just an armor asset. Oh dear. Okay, so no, they get 1. Okay, I'll have to rethink that. Okay, they don't have quite enough. They can go around here and get this fellow up to there. Over to the UN. Okay, so the UN's in trouble. They've moved the Marine up here. And you can do a quite neat thing. So this unit's moving here. Now, although it's not going to be able to attack these, it is holding them, so they're going to spend a lot of movement points to move out, which means that although they could get here, they won't have movement, they won't have action points left to create a decent attack against this unit. One of them will, but 2 of them won't. So it's kind of like a spoiling attack in a way, although it's just movement in game effect. Okay, and so that is it. We've come to the end of the operations segment. So effectively what happens is the North Koreans passed. They didn't want to move these units and these ones here. So the Americans broke down divisions here and here and splayed out some regiments just to slow down the North Koreans. Interesting situation. There's nothing here. They will get reinforcements in Busan deploying at the beginning of the next action phase, but it's wide open here. These are North Koreans. That's a UN supply depot, and the next UN units are up here. Anyway, so what happens now is we go to asset reassignment. So this armour asset, which was placed on the depot here, can move up. Let me just check. Yeah, that's right. It's in primary or secondary command range, so essentially within 20 movement points of the depot. So that's pretty nifty. That means that this asset can go all the way around here and go to that fellow. The Americans didn't have any. So then we go to the UN reconstitution segment. Effectively, what that means is if there's a UN division that has taken a step loss or 2, and they're still mobile, they haven't been moved. These ones actually have. then it could be brought back up to full strength, or at least it would gain 1 strength. So from 3 to 2, or 2 to 1 full strength. Okay, but we don't have any of that happening. So then we go to what they call the recovery segment. So essentially that means that everyone that has activated is deactivated. Okay, so just to clarify the terminology, these are now all mobile. If they had flit, i.e. been activated or spent, as I call it, they are called fatigued in this game. So everyone who is fatigued is put back to their mobile stage. Then we go to the marker segment. So we now move these markers off the depots because that will be redecided again. And we go to the minesweeping segment. Now what that means is that if the UN, for example, this port of Incheon had been captured by the North Koreans, if the UN recapture it, okay, the amphibious invasion is successful, then you put a minesweeping marker, so the ports could have been mined. Presumably they move some out of the way for the invasion, but to get all the supplies and so forth in, they have to really make sure it's clear of mines, and that can take, depending on die rolls, 2 or 3 turns. So that would happen in this segment. And now we go to the second action phase. So that happens just like this first action phase, so I won't go through that for you, but essentially we're going to start with the reinforcements, deployments, then we'll work out the supplies on the depots, and so the level of commitment, and then go into the operations cycles, and then these finishing off ones we've just done, like assets, transfers and so forth. So we've come to the end of the second activation phase, and you can see the jagged line of defence here. So the North Koreans actually only have 1 more victory city to take, and they've taken all 6 for their automatic victory. But still, the game is still continuing on. It's still all to play for. So at the end of the second action phase, the US mobilisation must be 2 or more for the UN reconstitution segment. So we had the operations. The North Koreans reassigned an asset up to here from their depot. We recovered, so split units from fatigued to mobile side. There's no mine sweeping necessary, and the UN reconstitution happens this way. These are UN units that have been destroyed. They now move from the destroyed units box to the reconstituting. Next reconstitution segment, provided, well, we're at the high enough mobilisation. Oh no, so we need to be at 2 and I'm not at 2. Oh, okay, so that doesn't happen. It only happens in I think the first phase. Those weren't eliminated at that point. Okay, so scrap that. So that reconstitution didn't happen. Those have happened. So now we go to UN air mission termination. So I've just set everything back to 0 for that. So these are all the air units available for assignment beginning of next turn. Then we go to the victory point phase. So this is where we count up victory points that the US still have, or the UN. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 4 for Busan. So that's 9. So they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they're on 24, which is a bit less than they really need. So they're just sort of hanging in by the skin of their teeth. They've got 2 regiments and an asset, armour asset here ready for deployment at friendly port. They're still holding this one. They could deploy it here or any of these, but these 2 are the most likely, or indeed back here, this is still held, so it has, actually that was an oversight by the North Koreans. They should have moved up there and then back. Oh no, it's this one. Yeah, that they have that, so that's North Korean. Okay, but they could. No, it has to be a port, and that's not a port. Those are for amphibious invasions. Okay, so scrap that. So it can only go in here or here or Masan. So those two or here. So essentially those are ready to move up to here. If we have to, but we'll move them back down there. So I think that's about it. So yes, victory point phase, game turn indication phase. So we move into game turn 4. And that's it. That's how you play out a turn of the Korean War. Okay, it's the beginning phases, so we don't have like a Chinese intervention, possible Russian intervention, etc., etc. Chinese nationalists, what have you. More things are going up there, but that's how the phases go, and the options that you have within a phase. I think I covered everything in terms of regular actions. There you